What happens when America's most notorious outlaw motorcycle brotherhood allies with the deadliest criminal syndicate south of the border? The answer isn't theoretical anymore. It's playing out in real time across the United States. The story of how biker culture collided with cartel empire building isn't just about drugs. It's about the evolution of organized crime into something law enforcement never anticipated fighting on American soil. By 2025, traditional smuggling corridors faced unprecedented scrutiny. President Trump's administration had militarized border enforcement to levels unseen in decades, forcing Mexican syndicates like Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation to completely reimagine their distribution strategies. The solution they found wasn't at the southern border, it was at the northern one. Canadian routes, long underutilized and less monitored, suddenly became golden highways for narcotics flowing into American heartland cities. But cartels faced a critical problem. They didn't control Canadian infrastructure. That's where the Hells Angels entered the equation. With chapters spanning from California to Quebec, this motorcycle organization possessed exactly what cartels needed: established logistics networks, transportation companies, and decades of experience, moving contraband without attracting federal attention. What made this partnership particularly sophisticated was how it functioned as a vertically integrated criminal corporation. Cartels supplied the product primarily fentanyl, the synthetic opioid that had become the most profitable drug in history. The Angels provided the distribution infrastructure, trucking firms that appeared completely legitimate, repair shops that doubled as transit points, and import-export businesses that masked illegal shipments among legal cargo. Intelligence reports traced at least 27 major fentanyl shipments between Vancouver and Chicago during 2024 alone, each moving through channels that looked, on paper, like ordinary commercial freight. Profits were astronomical. For cartels, the arrangement opened new markets without the risk of southern border interdiction. For bikers, it meant access to product quality and quantities they could never produce independently. Both organizations understood they were building something unprecedented, a transnational criminal alliance that blurred every traditional boundary between motorcycle club and drug cartel. But alliances built on greed rarely survive contact with reality. By late 2023, cartel leadership began demanding something the Angels had never given anyone: control. Mexican syndicates wanted more than distribution partners. They wanted subordinates. Emissaries arrived with ultimatums: accept tighter oversight, lower profit margins, and direct cartel management of operations, or face consequences. For an organization whose entire identity centered on autonomy and brotherhood, these demands represented existential threats. Criminologists studying outlaw motorcycle culture noted a fundamental incompatibility. Bikers sell routes. They don't take orders. When cartels attempted to impose franchise-style management, treating Angels like employees rather than partners, the relationship fractured overnight. What followed wasn't negotiation, it was violence. Execution-style killings emerged across Arizona, Alberta, and Ontario, bearing unmistakable cartel signatures: decapitations, victims burned inside vehicles, and threats transmitted through encrypted dark web channels. Between 2024 and mid-2025, at least 48 targeted killings across Canada and the northern United States displayed identical patterns of execution. Interpol analysts speaking to international media linked approximately half these murders directly to disputes over fentanyl pricing, territory, and shipments that mysteriously disappeared between handoff points. The code of silence that once protected both organizations had transformed into a code of survival: strike first or become the next message sent to rival leadership. What alarmed federal investigators most was the sophistication of the violence. These weren't impulsive street crimes. They were calculated, military-style operations using intelligence gathering, surveillance, and tactical precision. Analysts began describing it as a war within a war, bikers versus cartels, with American and Canadian civilians increasingly caught in crossfire they didn't understand and couldn't escape. Complicating the chaos further, a new generation of biker recruits emerged who bore little resemblance to traditional club members. These digital angels, as law enforcement dubbed them, didn't wear leather jackets or ride Harley-Davidsons. They moved fentanyl, methamphetamine, and weapons through encrypted messaging apps, cryptocurrency wallets, and even gaming platform communications. Less loyal to brotherhood tradition and more driven by pure profit, these younger operatives bypassed hierarchical structures entirely, negotiating directly with cartel middlemen online. This generational fracture within the Angels created unpredictability that cartels exploited ruthlessly. Criminal behavior analysts noted the strategy mirrored tactics cartels had perfected in Mexico. When you can't control an organization, fracture it from within, then profit from the resulting chaos. As older members demanded loyalty to club codes, younger ones prioritized digital anonymity and maximum profit margins, creating internal conflicts that made the entire network vulnerable. To understand how this alliance reached such scale, investigators consistently return to one foundational case: Jimmy Cournoyer, dubbed the King of Pot in early 2010s DEA and RCMP reports. His Montreal-based empire functioned as a billion-dollar enterprise that pioneered the exact model now threatening continental security. Cournoyer orchestrated shipments of Canadian hydroponic marijuana southward, while Colombian cocaine flowed northward, with cash laundered through shell corporations registered in Panama and the Cayman Islands. The Hells Angels, controlling Quebec's logistics infrastructure, provided indispensable services: muscle, transportation, and intimidation, precisely what cartels needed when expanding into Canadian ports and highways. Though Cournoyer himself now serves a 27-year sentence in federal prison, his operational blueprint survived and evolved. Canadian biker factions learned to replicate cartel logistics using encrypted phones, digital ledgers, and cryptocurrency. Meanwhile, cartels adopted the Angels' localized muscle strategy, creating proxy gangs throughout border states and Midwestern distribution hubs. As fentanyl's shadow spread across America, the Trump administration declared what many now characterize as the Second War on Cartels. But unlike previous drug wars fought on foreign soil, this conflict unfolded in American suburbs, border towns, and interstate highways. In March 2025, the White House signed the Transnational Criminal Threat Act, fundamentally reclassifying major cartel factions and biker networks as terrorist organizations rather than mere criminal enterprises. This designation granted ICE, DEA, and even the U.S. military expanded authority to conduct preemptive raids and surveillance operations without traditional judicial delays. Within weeks, Operation Iron Justice launched, combining intelligence resources from the CIA, the FBI, and DHS under a unified command structure. For the first time in American history, military drones were deployed domestically to monitor suspected cartel-linked convoys moving through Arizona, New Mexico, and Illinois. Results came swiftly and dramatically. In just 3 months, federal agents dismantled 9 fentanyl superhubs, seized over $2.8 billion in assets, and arrested more than 600 individuals tied to Hells Angels cartel partnerships. President Trump's administration responded with unprecedented force through Operation Sentinel Line, a joint domestic security framework launched in May 2025. ICE and DEA task forces now operated alongside U.S. Marines under a unified command structure, officially targeting transnational paramilitary threats, though insiders confirmed the primary objective involved dismantling cartel biker cooperation by any means necessary. Civil liberties groups warned the initiative blurred constitutional lines between police and military roles, but Homeland Security insisted escalation was justified given the scale of the threat. Still, behind impressive statistics lay a chilling reality. For every arrest made, 2 new recruits rose to fill vacant positions. Biker and cartel recruiters specifically targeted veterans possessing tactical training, truckers with commercial vehicle access, and unemployed factory workers familiar with industrial operations. They're soldiers without uniforms, one researcher noted, and that makes them perfect assets in this shadow economy. As violence spread from rural highways to urban streets, the cycle of reprisal accelerated, with the Hells Angels Code of Loyalty, once their greatest strength becoming their prison, forcing members to avenge every death or die trying. As autumn 2025 approached, a fundamental question confronted American policymakers and citizens alike. Can any nation truly defeat organized crime that operates with multinational corporate efficiency, military-grade resources, and technological sophistication rivaling legitimate industries? Every operation dismantled, every leader arrested, every shipment seized represented tactical victories, but strategic stalemate persisted. The criminal architecture pioneered decades ago had learned to mimic legitimate trade so effectively that distinguishing clean commerce from contaminated freight became nearly impossible. Customs agents described inspecting refrigerated trucks containing both legal produce and hidden fentanyl compartments. Financial investigators traced blockchain transactions through shell corporations registered in Caribbean tax havens. Intelligence analysts monitored encrypted communications bouncing through servers on 3 continents. The enemy had evolved beyond traditional organized crime into something resembling decentralized insurgency, resilient, adaptive, and nearly invisible, until violence forced it into public view. The Hells Angels cartel alliance, once merely a marriage of convenience between outlaws seeking profit, has evolved into a national security nightmare that challenges fundamental assumptions about crime, warfare, and sovereignty. What began as shared smuggling routes has transformed into a war for control of North America's criminal infrastructure, fueled by synthetic opioids, defended with military weapons, and financed through billions in laundered proceeds. Under President Trump, the U.S. government has responded with terrorism designations, military-assisted raids, and AI-driven surveillance, designed to crush what officials now characterize as domestic narco-insurgency. Yet with every crackdown, the networks mutate, recruiting new members, weaponizing emerging technologies, and burrowing deeper into the shadows of legitimate industries. Chicago's 2025 firefight wasn't an isolated incident, it was a warning. Cartels and biker factions are no longer content to hide. They're fortifying, defending, and increasingly willing to engage in open warfare against federal authority. The question confronting Washington isn't whether America can defeat organized crime. It's whether victory can be achieved without sacrificing the civil liberties and constitutional principles the nation exists to protect. How far should a democracy go to win a war that recognizes no borders, respects no laws, and adapts faster than enforcement can respond? If this investigation into the Hells Angels cartel war revealed threats operating in communities you thought were safe, if you believe America deserves protection from hybrid criminal military organizations, take action now. Subscribe to stay informed about operations mainstream media often overlooks or downplays. Comment with your perspective on where the line should be drawn between security and liberty. Share this report because awareness represents the first line of defense against networks that thrive in darkness and depend on public ignorance. The war on cartels has come home to American soil. The question is whether we're prepared to fight it without becoming the very thing we're fighting against.